Grabbed by the Ghoulies stood no chance when it first came out, since it was Rare's first game under Microsoft after they got bought out by them, and it didn't matter whether the game was going to be good or not. The simple fact that it was them being forced to work on Microsoft's console instead of Nintendo's really probably pissed a lot of people off, especially it meaning that they couldn't make Banjo 3, and well, this was the perfect punching bag for all that anger, and I suppose that it doesn't help that this game, although not being that bad, is definitely one of their weaker titles. But I just assume that this game got so much hate for just simply existing, so much to the point that Rare themselves even hate this game nowadays. Alright, so at the end of the first Halo game, you successfully destroy the Halo ring, and because of when you meet the monitor, you know that this ring was Installation 04. So I gotta say, in Halo 3, during the mission where you're trying to stop Truth from firing the rings, there's a really cool little detail. That being that it shows these holograms of the rings, and the fourth one in the sequence is showing parts that are broken, because again, that's the one you destroyed in the first game. So yeah, this is just a really cool, I guess you can call Easter egg as well. Although unfortunately, because of how small it is something that you could easily miss. Papers, Please is a very stressful game, you needing to get every single little detail about the person correct so you could either deny them or accept them, all while being on a time limit in which you need to get a certain amount of people through so that way you make enough money for the day. But I gotta say that there's no more nerve-wracking moment than when you're actually finished with someone and then you have to wait to see if you got it all right or wrong, since you're not immediately informed whether you did it right or not. Since the person starts walking away and you're relieved because you think you did it all right, but then a few seconds later that little pink slip comes up and you just know you fucked up. So in Castle Crashers, whenever you defeat an enemy, you get a reward from them usually, whether it be a coin usually or food. Although sometimes you can get nothing, but other times you can get something better, like 5 coins. And this is all for the regular enemies. And I specifically say that because throughout the game you do go up against buff enemies. And well, with these being much tougher enemies, you'd think that they have better drop rates for stuff. But no, they seem to be the same as the regular enemies. And it's just that this always felt wrong to me, with just a measly single coin coming out of a huge enemy like that. It should have been at least guaranteed 5. God, Sonic Superstars was such a disappointment, as we all expected another great classic Sonic game many years after Mania, but instead we get Sonic 4 Episode 3, but at least now I would say that I played a couple games that more than made up for that spectacular disappointment, those being the Freedom Planet games. And yeah, these are just genuinely great games. Fun, full-speed action, great music, great graphics, a more in-depth combat system as well as plot than the usual 2D Sonic game, and I guess I'll end this off by saying if you're just looking for something new Sonic-like, or maybe you got burned with Superstars like me, check out these games, they really are great, especially the second one. So when you get to Las Venturas and San Andreas, you're in for a pretty tough time, because once you get here, the missions kinda get a pretty big difficulty spike, like with you needing to fight off the Mafia, whether it be in the meat locker, or in the chip factory, or all the way back in Liberty City, or with the casino heist missions, like needing to get the bikes, or turn off the power, or get that helicopter, hell, the heist itself. And with all that, I always felt like that the Mad Dog mission was a nice little reprieve from all of it. You know, instead of shooting at people, trying to steal bikes, or sneak around, it's just the simple mission where you have to drive from point A to point B, and even then, the drive is like extremely short. So yeah, it just feels like a nice, simple, little easy mission to give you a rest from all the hard stuff around it. So the day has finally come. The Xbox 360 online stores have all shut down, and this is quite sad, especially to me who spent a lot of time on the 360. But hey, that's just the way it is. Stuff gets old and then it gets dropped. But one unexpected outcome from this that I definitely didn't expect was that the 360 dashboard changed. Yeah, I thought it was just gonna stay the same, and if you tried to go to the store, it would just say it couldn't connect. But no, they literally removed like everything. And I gotta say, it just feels so wrong to see the 360 dashboard stripped like this, and the fact that this is just what it looks like now. But again, what can you do? Alright, so infamously in Dead Rising, when you start the game, you're given a receiver in order to get calls about scoops that happen throughout the game. And this is infamous because the person who gives them to you, Otis, always calls you at the worst moments. Like, you'll be fighting a boss, and then he'll call you to tell you about a mission, and then if you get hit, he'll interrupt the call, and then he'll call you rude for interrupting it. But something that I always found kind of interesting and funny at the same time is the fact that although Otis is like the character that talks to you the most, like he is always calling, he does not have any actual voice lines. Like, he'll talk to you dialogue-wise all he wants, but he'll never speak an actual word, which just adds to the oddness of we'll never know how he actually spoke, what he sounded like. So games usually always had a standard, back in the day at least, when it came to how many players there were. It would always be a single-player game, a two-player game, or would just jump to 4 players. But that's not to say that 3-player games did not exist at all. And well, that's just a weird thing to think about, that although they are such a minority, they do, well, exist. And it's even weirder to think that they only exist that way because whatever they're based on. Because most 3-player games are based off of game shows where they only have 3 players. Although you can also come across the very rare, like, actual game that has only 3 players. So I've done quite the number of reviews on this channel, and out of all of them I would say I've definitely reviewed more good games than bad games. But having said all that, I definitely have to say that when I do review a game, it feels like it's much easier to review a bad game than it is a good game. Or I guess that I have more to say with a bad game, because with a good game it's just the general, oh, this feels great, this was a fun level, this was a great soundtrack, or whatever else. But with a bad game I feel like I could pick apart every single little thing that's wrong with it. And I suppose this is also true when talking about a good game with bad parts in it. I don't know, I guess it just comes easier to me to point out the bad stuff than the good stuff. So in the early 90s, Sonic had 2 cartoons, and then they both got spin-off games onto the Sega Genesis. Them being Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine and Sonic Spinball. And well, it's all in good that these shows got representation in game form, it's just that I couldn't help wondering something. That being, why didn't either of these cartoons get games, or maybe even, like, ports of these games to the Sega CD? I mean, that would have been a match made in heaven. You know, to not only play a game, but also, like, watch snippets of an exclusive cartoon made for the game. You know, like with the game that they made for the Batman animated series, just instead do it with Sonic. I honestly do think there was a whole lot of missed potential here. Alright, so in Paper Mario 2, whenever you buy an item, you get points for it, and the idea is the more points you have, the better item you can get. And although I'm not really a person who buys items in this game, I still have a question about it, which is something that I remember seeing in one of the emails, that there was a point in the game where you could go and get, like, double points for like 15 minutes, like at a specific shop in the game. And basically what I'm asking is, was that real? Could you actually go to that specific shop, I want to say it was the one in Twilight Town, and get double points? Because if that works, that would be really neat if Nintendo did that. You know, it's funny to think that Mario and Luigi, despite being the heroes of the Mushroom Kingdom, only live in a simple house. Like, you'd think for their heroics they'd live in a huge mansion, or maybe even at the castle with Peach. But no, despite everything, the humble brothers live in a small, simple little shack. But I guess you could also call this one of those subtle character traits of them not being in it for the money, fame, or glory, but instead to just be helpful to others in need. You know, it's always struck me as funny to think that literally just about any game, whether it be a platformer or a shooter, that in those games, like the story modes or whatever, the character you play as has gone through literally everything that the game has to offer without having died once canonically. And I just bring this up because you as the player are not going to get through like every single game you play without dying at least a few times. But through the eyes of the character, that never happens. They always succeed and always win. And well, it's just a neat contrast to chew on. Alright, so when you play Call of Duty Zombies and you kill the zombies, there's a potential for a power-up to spawn. Whether it be one that activates immediately like a Max Ammo or Carpenter, or ones that have like a 30-second timer like an insta-kill or double points. And well, I kinda want to focus in on the timer ones real quick, because whenever you pick them up, they're represented by the little icons at the bottom of your screen while they're activated, and then disappear when they're done. So at least it's weird to me to go all the way back to where this game mode first started on World at War with Nocturne Totem, potent and not see these icons appear, but instead just a straight up timer. But despite these unflashy timers, I would argue that there is some merit to them over the icons, or at the very least one merit that I can think of, which is knowing exactly when the power up would end, which would be very useful with like insta-kill. And although obviously they didn't keep them, I do genuinely wonder if there's anyone out there that actually prefers these timers to the icons. So in the first Dead Rising, when you complete the story, you unlock something called Infinity Mode. And in this mode, your health is always constantly ticking down. And in order to remedy this, you must go out and defeat survivors that are attacking you, as well as psychopaths, in order to get food from them so you can survive for longer. And basically my question is, what is the longest amount of time that you could actually survive within Infinity Mode? Because I know that all the enemies have like set spawns. Do they ever go away, or do they start repeating? So then you could potentially go forever. I mean, I'm pretty sure the highest I ever seen on the leaderboards was like 21 days. So assuming the enemies don't respawn, has anyone actually done the math and calculated how long you could potentially survive for? Alright, so in the Fallout games, you could pick locks to doors in order to open them, as well as guess the password to computer terminals in order to unlock them. And whenever you successfully do so, you gain XP. Granted, not that much XP, but XP nonetheless. And I bring this up because whenever you're playing, you can be lucky and stumble across like a password for a terminal, or a key to a door, or even a terminal that allows you to unlock like a safe or something. And well, I gotta be perfectly honest, unless like the thing I'm trying to open is way too high of a skill, I purposely like ignore these things or not pick them up. And this is because of the simple reason of you don't get XP when you use that stuff. And in my opinion, that's kind of just a waste of perfectly good experience points. So I guess I gotta wonder, does anyone else play like this? Or am I just alone on this one? It's weird to think that we've gotten to the point in gaming, or I guess technology in general, where every single version of a game is going to be the same regardless of what you play it on. And I just bring this up because I grew up in a time where, depending on what version of a game you played, it wouldn't be the same as whatever different version you played. Like, I'll use the examples of the SpongeBob games, like Battle for Bikini Bottom and the movie game were both 3D platformers on consoles, but then their Game Boy Advance versions were both 2D platformers. And then finally the PC versions was either a collection of mini games or even a point-and-click adventure. And that's basically it. I just think it's weird that we'll never have different versions of the same game on different platforms anymore. They're all just going to be the same thing. Which, I mean, I guess is a good thing because you're actually getting the proper game instead of a compromised version, but at the same time, there's no more uniqueness to the other versions. I don't know. I always found it weird when playing GTA games that none of them have a proper main menu in them. Like, the games would always start you off by loading in the last saved game, or if you had none, starting up a brand new one. And then once you got in, everything that you would find on a normal main menu would be found within the pause menu. Which I suppose, looking at it more, it is the more efficient thing because this way you're getting into the game quicker, but it still kind of just bugs me because it's like, there's no other games I could think of without a main menu. Well, that and thinking about it more is the fact that it sucks that you can't like go into the options and change stuff around before you start playing. You're just stuck with everything being set to default. You know, the game not being as bright as you want it to be, or needing to change the controls so you could play better, or the subtitles just starting off not being on. Although I guess this would only be true for your first time playing. I always loved this neat little thing that you could do in the drum minigame in Lights Camera Pants, which is the fact that you still have the ability to play even when it's not your turn, which, whether intentional or unintentional, is still really cool because it gives you something to do while you wait for your turn to come. Well, that and the fact that you still have the ability to basically keep playing along, which is really awesome because who doesn't love rhythm-based gameplay? So I semi-recently played through some childhood classics in the form of the I Spy games, and these games obviously were about you needing to find hidden objects within a single picture, and I just bring that up because I always found it odd that the bottom part of the picture was always slightly covered, so literally everything down there was never used. Which, I mean, I kinda get it because it's covered by the riddle of the stuff you need to find, but still. Although I will say it's pretty neat that you kinda get rewarded with the full picture when you beat the riddle. Alright, so here's just a little dumb story from my childhood. It involving GoldenEye 007, which for quick context, in that game you have your standard pistol in like every mission, the PP7, and then during the stealth missions you have the silenced version of it. And well, as a kid I didn't know what a silencer was, and in general I just misread it not as silenced, but as sliced. And in my mind I was using a weapon that was cut in half. And in my mind this made sense because the silenced version of the weapon was much smaller than the regular version of the weapon due to it being zoomed out slightly more when using it. I can't help but find it pretty funny when it comes to the dates of the 6th generation consoles that I own. This being due to the fact that the most powerful console of the generation, my Xbox, doesn't remember the date. It always defaults back to release day and only keeps the date when it's plugged in, but once you plug it out, it's back to release day, due to that one piece needing to be removed so it didn't kill the console. But then you have the GameCube, which actually does manage to keep the last date you entered, and then you just have to slightly update it. But then, here's the one that genuinely surprised me. The PS2, the weakest of the three, not only kept the date, but it kept going. So when I turn it on, it's like completely up to date. I honestly did not expect that from this console. So when I played Sonic Superstars, I kinda noticed something related to the fact that this game didn't have a life counter, so no matter how many times you died, you would always get put back at the last checkpoint and never get a game over. And it was this combined with the fact that throughout playing the game, I had many cheap deaths that happened to me, like literally areas where I had no rings and there was nothing I could do. And well, that just makes me wonder, did removing the life counter open up the door for the people who made this game to make it as bullshit as possible? Since, you know, there's really no penalty when you die. And well, I gotta admit, if that's true, that's like a horrible prospect for these types of games, Sonic or otherwise. Alright, so in Black Ops 1, there's a mission where you play as Hudson and you're infiltrating a mountainous Soviet base, and stuff ends up going wrong and you end up losing one of your men that you went in with, named Harris. And well, for as cut and dry that is, I mean, he falls off a mountain, apparently people thought that he survived it. And well, I just want to ask, why did so many people think that he survived it, so much to the point that Treyarch actually brought him back in Black Ops Cold War? I mean, I looked this up and it says that apparently once he falls, he still has like his name available when you look at him, which signifies that he's still alive. But let's be honest, that's probably more a glitch if anything, and I can only assume that from this glitch that the fans willed him back to life.